Tonight then, I'm going to spend most of the time talking about chapter 16, which is the resurrection, as we did last week with the crucifixion. Now, right away, we need to point out something that is unusual. That all the old, what I call the great manuscripts, have Mark finish at chapter 16, verse 8. So it is generally believed and accepted that verses 9 to 20, is it? Yeah. 19, is a later edition by a different author. And the language and the emphasis and everything is, even we'll probably be able to see that ourselves, even in translation and everything, we'll probably be able to see the distinction. So, there are various ideas that, as we'll see, if you finish at verse 8, it's pretty stark. It's not a happy ending. So, was there some of the gospel cut off in the manuscript? Lost? That's one theory. Did the later church not this very happy ending where there's no appearances of Jesus and added on a more palatable final section? Whatever a section was added, and it is of a different nature. Okay, so we'll look at it first. Now, when the Sabbath was over, so now we're talking Saturday, the Sabbath, right? Maybe why doesn't somebody read the whole thing first, maybe, and then we'll come back and look at it. Just read 1 to 8. Oh, but then I won't be on the table.
The resurrection of Jesus. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on, the first day of the week, they went to the tomb when the sun had risen. And they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the door of the tomb?" And looking up, they saw that the stone was rolled back, for it was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were amazed. And he said to them, "Do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, as he told you." And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had come upon them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid.
Thank you, Nisha. Okay, well, let's go back. So when the Sabbath was over, this of course is Saturday, so now we're talking Sunday morning. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. So this was a proper burial, giving him proper the rites of burial. Very early when the sun had risen on the first day of the week. Okay, so we're talking the new day. Sun has risen, so that's to be noted, and it's the first day of the week. So how many days of creation? 7. So the first day of the week is the 8th day. So this recurs in all of the resurrection accounts, it recurs here too, that it's a new creation, it's a new step in creation, it's a new action of God in creation. So with the symbolism of early in the morning, the sun had risen, the night has passed. Okay? They came to the tomb. they were saying to one another, who will roll back the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb? You remember from last week, Joseph had his tomb, he asked for the body of Jesus, he put it in the tomb and rolled a big stone across it. So, parallels that. When they looked up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. So the tomb is open. The place of death is open. The obstacle is overcome here. On entering into the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a white robe. Now, when's the last time you heard about a young man with a white robe?
He ran away.
He ran away in chapter 14. Do you remember? Yes, and left it there behind him. Okay. So, the white robe, that's one obvious reference. On the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus was dressed in a white robe. In the book of Revelation, the martyrs are all dressed in white. Right? So here again now, there's the young man in the white robe. So that has a baptismal connotation as well. So you have the Transfiguration. The young man in Mark, book of Revelation, the martyrs, baptism. You could say that there is both hope here, the hope of the transfiguration, the hope of glory, but there's also a certain terror, because there is the robe of the martyrs. So again, is this evidence Mark is writing for a church of martyrs, a church under oppression, a church under persecution. He is seated at the right hand. Remember anything to do with the right hand? What do you remember about the right hand? It was the vision of the Messiah was the seated at the right hand. Yes, the vision of the Messiah. Remember anything else from Mark's Gospel that we talked about one night before? Somebody was fighting to be at the right hand. Remember James and John? Yeah, they fighting to stay at the right hand. So here's the guy at the right hand. It's authority position, a ruling position. And Jesus, we say, sits at the right hand of the Father. And of course, who else was on the right hand and on both sides, I guess? You had the thief on the right hand and the thief on the left hand. Right? Okay. So, he's sitting on the right side, he's clothed in a white robe, and they were utterly amazed. He said to them, do not be amazed. Do any of your translations have afraid? Is it all amazed? Amazed. Alarm. Okay. Which is found in the pattern of an appearance, of an encounter with the divine. You seek Jesus of Nazareth the crucified. So now this is the title. Remember we talked about the titles of Jesus? This is the title. This is what defines him. Okay? He's crucified. The crucified one. He has been raised. He is not here. You seek. So, that's a word that has come up a few times in Mark 2. The crowds sought him out. The disciples sought him to say, everybody is looking for you. Usually people who seek him end up betraying him. So here you seek Jesus of Nazareth. He is not here. but go and tell his disciples and to Peter. So, firstly, I suppose, notice the contrast here. Peter and the disciples. Denial and fleeing. What did Peter do during the Passion? He denied. What did the disciples do? They fled. Right? So this is spoken to them. It's a new word for them. Go. I've often said this. One time when I first came into the United States, I was assigned in St. Emilius Church in Lincoln, and the big highway was Imperial Highway. So it was a matter of some intrigue to me that all the Baptist churches, something I'd never seen in Ireland, would put up the title of their sermon, during the week, And I'm thinking, Saturday night, I don't know what I'm talking about. And they have their title up with one day. But one day I'm coming back, and one of the guys had titled up, A God Who Says Go. Now that title stuck with me. A God Who Says Go. I've maybe said before that maybe the characteristic word of Jesus in Galilee, or in before his passion, is come. Come to me, come follow me. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Come and see. That's John. But after the resurrection, the characteristic word is go. Go, tell all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and I will be with you always. Go, tell the brothers. So, it is characteristic of the resurrection that Jesus is a mission for us. A mission is for the disciples and for us. There's a, is that centrifugal force or centripetal? The one that goes out. How is it centripetal? Centripetal. There's a centripetal force involved with the gospel in general and the resurrection in particular. It's an impulse out. I would say that's the dynamic movement of the church. It's from me to you, to the neighbour, to the enemy, to the ends of the earth. Right? So it's always a movement out. And it's always that go. Yonte is the go. So going to Galilee. That's interesting, isn't it? Galilee is where it's all started.
Yeah.
In Mark's, it's where it all started, right? That's what he called them. That's what he first commissioned them. Now it's like a new start. It's going to have to start again. To start in a new way. If you like, the discipleship is reopened. Remember what I said that one of the key issues throughout the Mark's Gospel is what is the disciple? Who is the disciple? And who is Jesus, of course. Okay? So now Jesus is the crucified one, but the discipleship kind of stopped at the Passion. Now it's reopened. It's about to be reopened.
That's why medieval maps had Jerusalem as the center.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. The kind of axis mundi.
Yes.
From where everything is spread out. Yeah. Now that's very much, of course, quite explicit in Luke's Gospel, where the Gospel moves towards Jerusalem and Acts of the Apostles moves from Jerusalem. So that's next year's course. So I suppose we should say here that, in the other Gospels, the appearances take place in Jerusalem, for the most part. But here he says, go back to Galilee. So it's about that recommissioning, the new world looking for a new start, a new beginning. He is going before you to Galilee. about that. What was a key element of discipleship? Following. Yes, thank you. Good. Following. So now the following is beginning again. He's going before them. You go before, you have to follow. Right? So the following of the disciple, that following dimension is restarted. There you will see him as he told you. Now, I suppose back to Peter and the disciples for a moment here. I think one of the key proofs of the resurrection is the Christian church, is the transformation of the apostles, of the disciples. They were, on Friday they were all fleeing, they were all fearful, afraid for their lives. After the resurrection, everything has changed. It's all changed. And they're changed. Peter and the disciples are new. Right? So, this could not just have been some kind of inner psychological experience. People don't go to the depths for some kind of idea or some vague spiritual feeling. So something happened that transformed them. It's that transformation that is one of the great witnesses to the resurrection. And the fact that the church went to continue to grow, or keep together and grow, I think is one of the great signs. Now, the other point here is, of course, that the word of the news of the resurrection is being sent to Peter, who must be full of remorse, who just denied, the disciples who fled. So it comes to them in their weakness. It comes to them in their failure of life. So maybe it is in the failure that we're ready to receive new life. That we're ready to be called into something new. That we are not full of our own pride, because the failure has knocked that out of us, so that we can let the Lord call it forward. But it is notable that, of course, the word is sent specifically to them. Now, in the next section, which is the add-on section, that theme is a bit picked up. When he had risen early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. So, there's the grace active in her life, and now she's the one that becomes the witness. She's the one that is has the eyes to see this. Then they went out and fled from the tomb, seized with trembling and bewilderment. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now that's where the gospel ends. The original gospel ends. So you can see it's not a very satisfactory ending. Some would say that it is that Mark is purposefully leaving it open-ended. The question is not to wrap it all up, but it's a question to the disciple. Will you be one who flees, or will you be one who follows? Follow or flee? Yeah.
Do you think it could also, since Mark was probably written for a persecuted church, ending on fear, It could almost be comforting to the people that were reading it because they were afraid.
Yeah. Yes. So, again, this is the opposite. This is the opposite to the Messianic secret, where Jesus was always telling people out of the gospel, don't say it to anybody, and then they go off and shout it everywhere. Now, these women have been told to go speak it, and they're being silent. But is this reflective again of a persecuted situation where people were not open about speaking? And so the question is to the disciple, what about you? Will you follow or will you flee? Will you speak or will you be silent? So that the gospel is completed, not on the page, but in the response of the church, the response of the disciples. So that's one theory. Chris, yes?
I was going to say, if it ends at verse 8, it seems like a good ending if the next thing we're going to read is going to be the Acts of the Apostles.
Say again, please.
If it ends at verse 8, it seems like a good ending if the next thing you're going to read is the Acts of the Apostles.
But the Acts of the Apostles is Luke's second book. It's the follow-up from Luke's Gospel. And so, Luke's Gospel ends with the ascension and picks up with the ascension in the Acts. So this is it for Mark. Mark does not have, that we know of any other writing. But, some argue that it's purposefully left ambiguous and open-ended as a sort of to be continued and completed in our lives. Our lives would be the ending of the gospel. Juan?
Yeah, so repeat again. Who wrote verse 9 to 20?
So we don't know who wrote it. Somebody later on, but it did get included, and it is canonical. I mean, it is included in the canonical gospel, but we don't have a name for the writer of 1916. Okay.
For the non-believer, does it leave an open window there for being a skeptic or the validity of something ends and where is left out?
Well, I mean, the scriptures have a lot of authors. So there's not, I mean, it's not limited to Mark or Matthew or Luke. So, I mean, the fact that somebody else wrote some doesn't necessarily mean that it's inauthentic. But it is evident that it is not the same author as Mark is.
It kind of reads like it has a literary quality to it if you stop at 8. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've read James Joyce, I imagine you have. It reminds me of The End of the Dead, where it's snowing on the graveyard and there's like this implication of Christ and Mary there just through the symbols.
Yeah, so it's, yes.
But I don't know if Mark had literary aspirations, but it's poetic almost.
We said at the beginning, Mark is not a sophisticated, writer of the language, I understand. I mean, there's lots of it's very simple, and there's some mistakes, and there's, he starts sentences with and all that. Mm-hmm. But it is a very well constructed and very carefully constructed, and he is quite an artistic genius in that sense, the way the pieces play off one another and pick up one another and the whole symbolic universe that he creates. So I think he is in that sense, a very sophisticated author. Yeah. Chris?
I mean, if you think of it as an addition to the gospel, it's a short addition. I mean, it's just a very brief addition. So it would only be added to make a few points.
Yeah. Yes. The main thing is probably the appearances. There are no appearances before verse 8. There's an illusion. If you go to Galilee, you will see him, but it doesn't recount. So what we get here is the empty tomb and the mission. Right? You know, the goal. We don't get appearances like we do in all the other Gospels.
Actually, the fact that it's canonical, that means that it was validly
Yes.
considered the inspired word of God, and that's why it's included.
That's
So
correct.
even though it's another author, it doesn't make it any
No,
less
it doesn't.
important for us.
I mean, most scholars would say that the prophet Isaiah is at least 3 authors, and written at different times. I know just group of Isaiah, but it doesn't matter. I mean, as they say, Shakespeare wasn't really written by Shakespeare, but by another author with the same name. Doesn't matter, you know. It's like we don't even know when we think we know who Mark is, but we don't really know. I mean, there's another person called Mark in the New Testament, and that's the one that we related it to. But do we know that's for sure? We don't know that's for sure, no. So, I mean, there's always a certain... Did somebody write it and take on the patronage of Mark and Matthew, as was common in those times? I mean, the identity of the author is not necessarily all that important, you know. You know what I mean when we say canonical? No. So, I think I might have said before, there are really 4 moments in time in the formation of the Scripture, right? There are really 4 moments in time. There's the original event of Jesus Christ, probably from about 3 or something BC to 390 AD. Okay, so that's the original event. That's the first time. The second is the community of believers who gathered to remember, to break bread, celebrate the Eucharist, and remember the teachings and the stories that Jesus did and told, right? So there's a worshipping people. That's the second stage. So then at a certain point, some writer out of those communities wrote the gospel in this instance, right? So that's the third stage. There are many authors. So the fourth stage is when the church decides which authors make the cut and which don't. Right? So it's like, so Mark does, Thomas doesn't. So there's a discernment by the church as to what is inspired Word of God and what is not. And that was finalized in 313 at the Council of
Nicaea.
Or Nicaea.
Nicaea, was it?
I was thinking Trent. That's
No, Trent is much later.
It's later, isn't it?
That's Reformation.
yeah.
Chalcedon.
Well, aren't your first list Tertullian, and isn't the final proclamation actually Trent? I think that's the first formal.
No, I think there was one of the early councils has kind of consolidated the scripture. Now, the Reformation, of course, Luther kicked out some books. And
Right, that's why Trent did it.
Yeah, they reaffirmed, but now they're back to, well, I think 330, the idea was one of the early councils, you know, determined which it was. I should have got it, but it wasn't, yeah. I said Chalcedon, what is Chalcedon? I've done it in my head, but I should look that up. But that, anyway, there was a point at a council of the church where they agreed on the books of the scripture.
I don't mean to drag us into the deep end, but could you summarize sort of what it turns on? You know, what the council used as the yardstick to decide. I've seen some of the apocryphal Gospels myself, and it's pretty obvious what is left field and what's not. But maybe you could summarize.
I would say it's a process analogous to the definitions of dogma, that it was the sense of the faithful first, that there was a general sense that some texts were being read in church and were being taken as inspired and others were not. A bit like, you know, it's not like the Immaculate Conception was invented by the Pope. It was in popular devotion before it was defined, you know. So I think that's more the process. It was a discernment and a general a sense of the faithful, as they say.
So you've got what was used and what was in the bargain bin.
Yes, David.
I can keep you, and I'll be quick. I read a book by Elaine Pagels, who wrote the Gnostic Gospel.
Yes.
And she was talking about the Gospel of Thomas versus the Gospel of John.
Yes.
And she thinks, her theory was that the early Christian churches, because there wasn't one unified church at the beginning, we each have their own gospel, and they just kind of have this gospel, and they worship around that. And there was a competition, apparently, her theory, between Gospel of Thomas and Gospel of John. And that's why it's only in the Gospel of John that we see Thomas, St. Thomas, the doubter. St. Thomas was the only one that when Jesus appeared after the resurrection, he was the only one not there. So they say that her
This was polemic. It was polemic.
there was this fight between them. Because I think in John, when Jesus says, "Was I the way, the light, and the truth," and he that believes in me gets to God, basically. Well, in Thomas, it's he that Jesus says, "I am the way and the light and the truth, and he that drinks from my mouth becomes me." And that totally took away the need for priesthood, church, anything. And it left too much in the hands of the individual. So she argues there's a big fight between these two churches.
I haven't heard that before. I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's move on and take a look at the briefly at the rest of the chapter. When he had risen early on the first day of the week, so again we're on the same day, the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. So of course this is common to other Gospels too. She went and told his companions, who were mourning and weeping. When they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they did not believe. So what we get here first is a summary of some of the appearances from the other other Gospels. So this is the Easter morning in Luke. They go and they tell them they don't believe. They have to run to the tomb and all that. Then after this he appeared in another form to 2 of them, walking along their way to the country. They returned and told the others, but they did not believe them either. What does that refer to? Emmaus. That's the road to Emmaus, isn't it? The 2 disciples walking together to the country, and then they returned, just like a summary of Luke 24, which is the road to Emmaus and then coming back. Okay? And of course, again, the disciples are not clothing themselves in glory. But later, as the 11 were at table, because Judas is gone, he appeared to them and rebuked them for their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they had not believed those who saw him after he had been raised. He said to them, "Go into the whole world and proclaim the gospel to every creature." Where does that refer to? That's Matthew, the last, the end of Matthew 28. "Go teach all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and know that I am with you always, even until the end of the age." So that's Matthew. So he see this edition is drawing from the other accounts and giving like summaries. And that's the goal again, the Iontes, the goal. That's centripetal force again. "Whoever believes in me and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. These signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak new languages. They will pick up serpents. And if they drink any deadly thing, it will not harm them. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover." Okay. So this points to some key tasks or key elements of the mission of the church. Preaching. Go into the whole world and proclaim the gospel. So, key element in the mission is preaching. Healing. So they drive out demons, they will restore spiritual well-being. And then they will be accompanied by some power. We don't have to take all this literally, but they will have they'll have power over the forces of darkness, over the demons, there'll be some power. Now, some will argue that this is a total retreat from Mark. Because for Mark, what characterizes the disciple is, can he go to Calvary? You know? You see a witness to the death and resurrection. Here we're moving to Jesus, not as the crucified one, but the miracle worker. So, some would argue that there's almost like a stepping back from Mark there into a more comfortable, maybe a more powerful image of the Lord rather than the crucified one. Or you could just take in the way that I said earlier, that it's indicating some of the elements of the church, preaching, healing, the overcoming of the forces of darkness, we could maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't like to try drinking the poison and checking my faith against that. They will have to be sick, that's the healing, and they will recover. So then the Lord Jesus, after he spoke to them, was taken up into heaven and took his seat at the right hand of God. But they went forth and preached everywhere, while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the word through accompanying signs. Okay? So now this time they do speak, they do go forward. Not like in verse 8 where they didn't speak. They do go forward and preach, and the Lord was with them. So it's a bit, again, like the end of Matthew. The church has a mission, but Jesus is with them. I will be with you always until the end of time. And he confirmed their word through accompanying signs. So, up to verse 8, it says Jesus going to be in Galilee, where it all started. Here it has him at the right hand. Here it has him took a seat at the right hand of God. Maybe both things are true. Huh? Both things are true. And he reported all the instructions briefly to Peter's companions. Afterwards, Jesus himself, through them, sent forth from east to west the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. So there we are. It is a subject of much debate and scrutiny as to that second ending, and what it means. Is it to be taken on as a kind of almost like a dressing up of Mark, kind of putting a happy ending where there wasn't a happy ending, or is it simply, an addition to elucidate a bit more the mission of the church and so that. So, basically, it takes a choice. Okay, let's see. Yes, please.
What does it mean when they said, after this he appeared in another form to two? This is verse 12. That's the right
Verse, where are we now?
Verse 16, verse 12. Chapter 16. Appears to
Appears to them in another form. Well, yes, remember in Luke in chapter 24, they didn't recognize him. He walked around the road with them, but they didn't know him until they recognized him at the breaking of the bread. So I would take it to refer to that it was something different than what they knew before the day. Yeah.
Is that kind of insinuating that the person that they met into was Jesus too? Or,
No, I don't think so. No.
because he said another form. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it's a summary, a reference to the Emmaus story in Luke's Gospel. Chris?
Just another comment about, adding on the extra line, could be to meet the needs of the audience. I mean, it's kind of saying, take some courage,
Yes.
buck up, you've got a job to do.
Yeah.
And,
Yes. And, if we are to go with that Mark wrote in Rome, that is a very particular situation, both in terms of geography and in terms of history. The persecution didn't happen all the time, and it wasn't. So, others were reading the gospel that were not necessarily in that particular situation. They were not necessarily under persecution. Mark's gospel does seem to be written towards an audience under persecution. It does seem there's quite a bit to argue to that, So, but then maybe that's not going to speak to everywhere or other places where maybe the task is to preach and openly and be much more explicit and overt about the faith.
But there is no indication of the time, how much later that second part that was added.
We don't know that. No, we don't know that.
So there might have been a perceived need after.
But probably not that long. It was probably because most people think John wrote somewhere maybe around 90 to 100, and maybe the Book of Revelation maybe about 110, 20. So it's probably somewhere before that.
Mark was finished.
When Mark wrote, it is believed, generally believed, maybe around 68 or something, before the fall of Jerusalem, but maybe not that long before.
Somebody might have felt the need to
Yeah.
tack that on.
It is certainly a strong ending. It's not a happy ending. They all fled. They didn't say a word about it, and they didn't obey the command. There is something of it's a very bracing kind of ending.
any idea how many texts are available at this time? I mean, you're talking about you wrote the gospel, it's like there seems to be a written form of it. It's like, was it one sacred?
So there would have been copies. Now, I don't know, that's some area not up on how many manuscripts. My understanding is that there were a lot of manuscripts, certainly by the year 200, there were a lot of manuscripts. In the of course, go on that. There were many more manuscripts of the Christian text than, say, of Virgil or Plato or other famous authors. But how many there were, like at one stage there were many, I don't know. I mean, presumably he wrote one, but then I'm assuming it got copied fairly immediately. So it's always hard. It's written on parchment, it's always possible that some of it got...
Yeah, I mean, it's just be interesting to know how they decided who got one, because there seems to be, I mean, it would still seem to be very rare and precious, and you would...
So they say that the earliest manuscripts do not have the second ending, that they do end with the first eight. That's what
The earliest manuscripts.
Hmm.
The earliest.
The earliest manuscripts, yeah.
I wouldn't know about the manuscripts of the Bible, but like the Library of Alexandria, wasn't it common for someone to come in, look at a scroll, and then copy it? And that was what you did. Instead of checking out the scroll, the way we check out books,
Right.
they would go and copy it and take their copy.
Yeah. Plus that if it was a valuable text, nobody's got a chance just having one. I mean, they're going to be making copies, and it's obvious that Matthew and Luke had access to Mark. So that must mean that there were manuscripts in their community. They're not going, if the first one was in Rome, they're not going to Rome to read this document.
That book I was telling you about by E.P. Sanders, I read the other day about how what they think happened. I think that there were sayings that were taken out of context. And they said nobody wrote anything down because the first believers felt that Jesus was going to come back immediately. So they didn't need to write any story down because he was going to be there. And then later, after a few decades passed, they say they started taking things like out of context from personal accounts, like Jesus and children. So it was like, to get into the kingdom of heaven, you have to be like this child. And so they would have these little just sayings, and then from there they developed into a more storied gospel that we have like this, that actually has a not a plot, but
Yes, a narrative.
consistent theme to it.
Yeah. So we could say that Mark invented that genre.
Yeah.
That it is a narrative framework for the remembered teachings, miracles. Not so much teachings in Mark. There are very few parables, very teaching, but the deeds, the miracles, and then the passion and resurrection, of course. So that he put a narrative and even geographical structure on all of that. The geographical structure, I mean, Galilee, Jerusalem, that whole thing. And so, yes, that's likely what happened, that the community had a certain store of memories, and the author then took them, fitted it into a narrative structure with his own emphasis, given his audience and given the theological points he was trying to make. Which, again, repeating, for Mark is, who is Jesus? The first line, remember, the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus, the Christ, Son of God. Now, halfway through the Gospel, in chapter 8, the first of those titles is validated when he asks Peter, who do you say that I am? And you are the Christ. Peter answers, right? So that's the affirmation of the first one. And then at the crucifixion, the centurion, truly this man was the Son of God. So that goes back to the second time that I was proclaimed at the beginning. Well, just a little note, I didn't mention we did chapter 8. The traditional from the Old Testament phrase of revelation was I am, Yahweh, I am who I am who I am. It's translated in various ways. Moses said to the burning bush, who shall I say sent me? And he says, Yahweh, right? So Jesus interestingly translated to question. I am, or who am I? Who am I? It's interesting that he, John would use the I am statements. It's like 7 of the Gospel. It was interesting that Jesus turned that revelatory phrase into a question. And Peter answers in the title that we just went through. A little note from last week, catching up too. We had the centurion is a Roman. So we have the Romans condemned Jesus, but we have a Roman confessing his faith. Joseph is a member of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin condemned Jesus, and Joseph is a member of the Sanhedrin. So it's like the signs of, if you like, intimations of renewal, victory, or change, even in these places of that are part of condemnation and of condemning him. And the third category is who was at the foot of the cross. It was the women, right? The women were at the foot of the cross. So you have the disciples as well, who had fled and who were weak and who were part, didn't understand and all those things. But yet you have some who are watching. That's key. We've said that's a key phrase. what would be 1 hour? And then we went through chapter 13 and all the apocalyptic stuff. The thing was to watch. So they watched. They were there at the cross. So you have those three groups represented: the Romans, the Sanhedrin, and the disciples at the cross. So it's already, the cross is having some salvific consequence in that. Right.
Yeah, one of the one was at the right hand of Jesus crucified. Then he also said to him, remember me.
So that's in Luke. That's Luke's gospel. In Mark and Matthew, they're just two thieves. And they make fun of him. But Luke, of course, being the gospel of compassion, mercy, and all that, has the good thief. A curious phrase. Was thieving something he was good at? Is it something he excelled at? He was a good thief. Or is it because he stole his way into heaven? Which he kind of did. Kind of stole his way in at the last minute. That's it. Somebody told me today that, John Wayne was a little around here, right? That he wouldn't be baptized. He had a Catholic wife and Catholic children. He wouldn't be baptized until right before he died. And then he was. But he refused to do it right before he died. He figured, might as well just do that good teeth thing. I think he was baptized at home. Took the Constantine option. There you go, the Constantine option. That's the good one. So, any other loose ends?
Didache. How does that fit in with the Bible?
So the Didache is the Didache. It dates to about 200, as I understand, maybe a little bit more. So if we were to go post-biblical texts, some of the earlier ones would be Ignatius of Antioch, and then the Didache. And the Didache is it has a description of the Eucharist and of the liturgy in it. It has, I suppose, maybe a description of life in the early churches, that may be fair. But it's mostly quoted in relation to the liturgy. So it is not a biblical text, but it is an esteemed text, as would be the letters of Ignatius of Antioch and all that. It would be more in the writings of the fathers at this stage, rather than independent biblical. So yes, it would be in a different category than it would be, say, the Gospel of Thomas. It would be more highly esteemed as well. Am I right about the timeline of that?
I've heard earlier dates, but,
Yes,
I've heard as early as 90 and as late as 140. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that early.
Yeah.
That early. Oh, I had 200 right. Oh, I didn't think it was that early.
I was going to double check.
Maybe it's on there. So it's an early text. Yeah, it's an early text. Didache would have something to do with teaching. It means to teach. Didactic. Didactic. Will be what will come from that root.
And it exists.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it exists.
The original, as far as we know.
I don't think I can say that for sure.
A copy.
I don't know that I can say
A copy exists.
Reliable copy.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's. I want to thank Tessa for picking up this piece of it and doing the leading us on the street. So, here's Tessa.
Yeah, before we start, Kevin wanted us to remind everyone about this Friday, the healing.
Yes.
Healing camp.
So, we're going to have a prayer time here, actually, in English. We're going to do something similar to this in the church in Spanish. So it's be somewhat Taizé style, but the focus here is on prayer and healing, and especially in the light of the Father situation and the hurt of the community. So we bring that to prayer and bring that to the healing presence of the Lord. So it will be here in St. Joseph's on Friday evening, 7 to 8. Okay. Good, thanks.
Thanks. So can we give everyone a hand before we get started with the prayer for all the food, I mean the amazing stuff that you guys have done over the last 6-7 weeks? What is it? 6 weeks? Yay. Thank you all. So does everyone have one of the gospel sheets? Anyone missing? Okay. I'm not going to say a lot about this gospel just because we've spent the whole session pretty much talking about it. These are the first, basically, chapter 16, first 8 verses. So you've got what was originally, in the earliest versions of manuscript that survived today, the original ending of Mark. Is here, Father Jay spent a lot of time talking about it already. But the one thing to remember is that the Sabbath being for the Jewish people, Friday night to Saturday night, so to speak, sundown to sundown. So that's your time. So basically, as we think of in Mark, and some of the Gospels have it differently, specifically, John changed it, but in Mark, we believe that the Last Supper, as we call it, happened on Thursday night, and then we had Good Friday, and then the Passover was right after that. And John has changed it slightly so that Passover falls on Good Friday. So if you read through the Gospels, you'll see slight differences, but as you know, for example, Mark being the first one, and then the other Gospels built on Mark, the other 3 synoptic Gospels built on Mark, with John being the Gospel that's written farthest away from when Jesus was on earth and died for us. So what I will do today, and you know this process well, we'll break into groups of 3. 3 looks like a good number tonight. We'll start with a prayer. One of the questions that I had today is, can you do this by yourself at home for the rest of your Lent? And you certainly can, and you can use the sheets that we've used before. Granted, these are longer passages maybe than you might have time at home, but the nice thing about doing this at home is you can go deeper. So you can even take one paragraph and spend a lot of time on it, and just give yourself the time for prayer and reflection, which is different. Not that this isn't good what we're doing, but it's just different to have a more quiet setting for this. Okay? So let's start with the prayer to the Holy Spirit, which is on the back. And we'll say it together. Breathe into the Holy Spirit, that my thoughts may all be holy. Act in me, Holy Spirit, that my works too may be holy. Draw my heart, Holy Spirit, that I love what is holy. Strengthen me, Holy Spirit, that I may defend all that is holy. Protect me, Holy Spirit, that I always may be holy. Amen. Okay.
I'll read the Gospel. Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought the spices so that they might go and anoint him.
Then they fled from the tomb. Caesar was trembling and miserably. So he
Thank you. So who wants to talk a little bit about what struck them, what phrase or what even bigger idea than a phrase perhaps? Sometimes you read something here that just hit you in a big way as it relates to your life.
We had a common thing. We had a common thing not to trust God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when you were saying the door was really huge, the stone.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to move it? Like, we have to trust Him that He's going to make a way. No matter what situation or trial we have,
Mm-hmm.
He's going to make a way for us.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else on that? Who's going to roll the stone away? Did you have something to add, Peter? He's eating, never mind.
And Peter noticed tell his disciples and Peter. So some of the discussion we had was and Peter, because Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So it was a way for them to get that message that even though he denied him, he will be part of it, and he's included him.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a little bit about inclusivity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that too earlier.
Yeah,
He made
that
a
was stuck out.
specific mention of Peter. So I think it must have been pretty amazing, to use a word that's actually in here, that not only was Jesus gone, but there was this person here who actually knew them and knew about disciples and Peter. So, anyone else? Another thought? Another phrase or idea?
One thing we noticed was that the man, the young man sitting to the side in the white robe, in some versions of scriptures, it's an angel, identified as an angel, and in other gospels, it's assumed to be angels. Like in John's gospel, it says there were 2, and they were in dazzling white, but you assume they were angels, even though at least my version didn't just identify them as angels, but Amelia's did. So it's just the fact that, that's in this particular reading, it wasn't really as identified that, identifying it as an angel. So I think that was sort of something to note.
Yeah, that's true. And I wonder too if this is through their, it almost sounds like it's telling it through their eyes. They saw a man in white sitting on the right side, and they're like, already don't know what's going on. Because the other, some of the other gospels, they are asking, what did you do with our Lord?
You also notice that in this version, the angel tells them, go and tell. But they started believing, they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid.
Right.
And we remember a few weeks ago when he said to the lepers, somebody, don't say, and he said. And when they are told, say, they don't say.
They don't say,
It's all on Mark's writings.
Right. And in Mark, he tells them, right, the shepherd will be struck and the sheep will scatter. And he says, right then, I will go to Galilee before you. And still, it's hard to reconcile it all. I guess as a human, with our human brains, it's just hard to pull it all together and keep it in your mind what Jesus was actually talking about at that time. I think they were not understanding the death part of it, or they were just still struggling with that whole idea that their Lord and Savior literally died. Any other ideas, thoughts?
We had the thought that there were women at the crucifixion, and it was the women who saw the risen Lord first.
Yes. We thought that was an interesting common point there.
Yeah, that's true. And that's not in here, but in the next verses, he does appear to the women first, and in the other Gospels as well. Yeah. Well, the women were at the cross to the end.
Yeah, you're right.
Or they just get up earlier. Chris?
I was just struck by those words, trembling and bewildered, trembling and bewilderment. And I think now that, it's in the face of something miraculous, and how when something so powerful happens, that's going to be the response. It's just going to make you tremble and bewilder you.
Yeah, I think if you've never seen, and we're going to take for granted this is an angel, it's a fearsome thing. Even though we imagine it's all cute and pretty and light. But what we know about the episodes in the Bible where an angel appeared is that they usually say, do not be afraid. Yeah, that's beautiful. Anyone else want to add anything?
And the angels are always young. So I was thinking we're probably going to be all young.
They don't age, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking we're all going to be young. Because they never have an old age. There's no age in heaven.
True.
Yeah.
We believe, anyway.
Our Lord gives us examples of it.
Yeah. Well, there is that story where they try to trip Jesus up, and they said, well, if
Man was married.
right, the man was married, and the first husband died, and then the brother married her, and then he died, and the next brother, 7 brothers, and then when they die, who's going to be, when they're raised up, whose wife is she going to be? Jesus said, there's no marriage in heaven. Great. Any other comments? Anybody see anything? I chose "do not be amazed" for the same reasons we're talking about here with the angel. That we, and Sherry said something similar as well about what kind of life would you have to be living. You want to say something about that, Sherry?
Oh, yes. Well, you did not feel amazed when you saw God taking action, because we still see God taking action. I mean, you go to a healing mass, and I'm sure there are some healings that I've been in. You see God in action, people changing and stuff like that. And yet I always feel like, wow, there's God. It's like I'm a groupie. And I was thinking, well, the only way you would not ever feel amazed, no matter what, you'd have to be full of grace, like Mary was. The Holy Spirit completely filling you. Mm-hmm. I've been told by someone else the concept of you can kind of keep an eye out for if you're getting separated from the Holy Spirit, if your joy disappears, because then you're probably under attack. So, it's just like that's something to watch out for, and that helps you to say, wait a second, what's happening here? I'm going to hold on to my joy. I'm going to respond like Christ would want me to, instead of not. that these little things are actually spiritual attacks trying to separate you. But wow, it would be an amazing thing to see something like this happen. You go, yeah, wow, it's God, yeah, cool, let's go see if we can get our money back for the oils and the spices. Wow.
Again, the trend, consider the different translations. And this Bible, it was, they were surprised. Doesn't use the word amazed. And surprised, to me, would mean I was taken, I was taken up short, startled, whatever. It didn't have anything to do with the mental thought of not being able to understand, so therefore being amazed by what was going on. So what a difference it makes what the words, what the translations are.
Yeah.
I think Mark, he likes to use simple words. That's why he does use the word surprise. He's not into big words.
Right. And I know on my Kindle I have NIV, and it says "do not be alarmed." So it really, the translation makes a huge difference.
It gives you a little bit different.
Yeah. Same gospel, just the translation.
Yeah, and this was Mark too.
So Tessa, this originally, Mark would have been written in what language?
Mark would have been written in Greek.
And he didn't speak Greek.
And not very well, I think. But they were pretty much Hellenized in that sense all over Jerusalem and Israel, because the Romans who were occupying them were actually Greek Romans. So that's what I've read anyways.
So it would have been Greek into the next language. That's the translation then from there into English.
Right.
So what we're looking at is more than one translation.
Yes. And there are a lot of people who keep going back to the original Greek and retranslating. And I think that there's some translators that actually try to translate as if they were living in that time so that the words can make that sense. Because now someone said inclusion. Nowadays they're translating in wholly different ways to make things inclusive. So it's very, very different. Any other last comments? All right. And I want to thank Richard for all of his dancing around here. All right, let's close with our prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of Our Lady of Grace,
Pray for us.
amen. Thank you.